Hello and welcome to the Q&A Serie A Chronicles podcast, where we listen and answer the questions that you have kindly sent us. As always, I am joined by Nicky Bantini. Hello, Nicky. It's been a while.
It's been so long.
Actually, our first question is a really interesting one, Nicky, because it is a voice one. We have Evan Sardo from Rochester. Yeah, Rochester, New York. Yoo-hoo! Hello to our American listeners. And he is a Chronicles Tifoso, a Patreon member. So obviously he has top billing. Thank you so much for your support, Evan. And he has left us a question and we can actually hear his voice. So take it away, Evan.
Hello, Mina and Nicky. My name is Evan. I'm a proud new Tifoso, and I have a question for you about Sassuolo, who I find very curious this year. I've watched them play probably 5 or 6 times, and they've looked brilliant every time. Based on what I've seen, they look like one of the top sides in Serie A, but they've obviously had several poor results, and they're pretty firmly mid-table. So I'm wondering, who is the real Sassuolo? And what do you think is more likely for their future? Is this a club set up for a long mid-table existence, or can they do more? Thank you.
I think it's a really interesting question because I really enjoy watching Sassuolo as well, Evan. I find them a really fun team to watch. They're definitely not purely talent-wise one of the top teams in Serie A. They're not blessed on a level that some of the richer clubs are, and that's not surprising because they are not anywhere near the wealth of a Milan or an Inter. But they have some really interesting young talent in that side. Obviously, there's sort of the big name, I guess, of Domenico Berardi, who's not that young anymore, but you've got Raspadori and you've got Scamacca, the two sort of young Italian forwards that lots of people have been looking to and talking about as maybe even the players who could save Italy's World Cup qualification hopes. I'm not so sure about that, but both of them in very different ways. These young, interesting centre forwards, one of them, Raspadori, sort of much more smaller, quicker, all about his footwork. Scamacca, big, imposing number 9 of the classic molds. But then you've also got Davide Frattesi in midfield, who's another really interesting player who's been emerging and playing really well at times this season. And you've also got Maxime Lopez, who again, not as old as Berardi, but he's still in his early 20s, but he's another young player who's been really interesting and developing. And I think that almost to some extent, you can keep going down the list. There's more than just those players, but that's almost sort of the headline with Sassuolo is young, interesting players, abundantly talented players, but young players with limited experience of top level games, and that's why you get inconsistent performance from them. You get performances that can be really, really strong because they are very talented group who took. I felt like some of these players took some big steps forward under Roberto De Zerbi, who's the previous manager, who was absolutely an empower all your players, Gasperini sort of school of management, but with far less attention to defending, which says something because Gasperini has at times been accused of not putting enough attention in that area. And now they're working under another young manager, Dionisi, who's taking them in a slightly different, not drastically different direction, but perhaps a slightly more controlled direction, and continuing to develop them. I think that they are a really fun and talented team to watch. And because they've got all this young, precocious talent, they can mix it with the big teams. They're not ready to be one of the big teams themselves yet. But just to sort of answer the broader question of I guess, what is the sort of structural possibility of Sassuolo? They're a really well-run club. They're one of the earliest clubs to get its own purpose-built stadium in Serie A. They are a club that is backed by some real money because Mapei is the Mapei group, who effectively own the club, are a industrial adhesive company that is global, that has lots and lots of money behind it, and they're run in a sound, not reckless way based on developing young players and selling them for the right price and having a long-term idea of how you sustain a smaller football club from a not huge town in the end of things. So they're a really good model of a well-run club, in my opinion, one of the best run clubs in Italy. but they're not set up to be, I suppose, a consistent challenger to Milan or Inter. Having said that, you would have made exactly the same argument about Atalanta, and look how they're hanging around in the top 4 these days.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing you can say about Atalanta is that they've always had this great academy that they've always heavily leaned on, and but they have a small budget. But they are, again, a well-run side that is dependent on growing and developing youth. But let's be honest, Gianpiero Gasperini changed their fortunes around, and he really has given them the reputation that they've had now for the past few seasons, in the sense that they challenge, obviously, not just in Serie A, but in Europe too. But for the case of Sassuolo, it's different, because I think that's just such a great point about them being such a well-managed club. It is the fact that everyone shares their duties. It's run like a corporation where nobody interferes with any task. So head of sporting, that you have a person who makes the transactions and negotiates the deals. You have a person scouting. You have a person who takes those scouts and then develops it further. There is a clear idea of what Sassuolo want from their players, on the type of talents they're looking for, where they scout, how what they're looking for exactly, and how they can manage to ensure balance on a squad level overall. And I think what's important about them is they like young Italian talent when it comes to their players, but also when it comes to their coaches. And they did a terrific job, and they were brilliant under Eusebio Di Francesco, who has gone on to potentially not as much success, really, ever since leaving Sassuolo. He's managed some good things, such as Roma in the Champions League, but largely he is disappointed as a coach. De Zerbi is a man who developed them even further. There was a lot of plaudits for the way that he played his football and for the talents that he managed to really develop and extract the quality of the likes of Locatelli, even more so from the likes of Berardi, and especially Raspadori. He's gone on to Shakhtar, and he's the man who had 70% possession over Inter, yet didn't manage a single goal. So I do have my criticisms of this man, because he took too many defensive risks. And now under Dionisi, again, I think they are a side that's obviously always... there is a problem there, in the sense that Sassuolo are never going to be a team that knows how to shut up shop very well at the back. I think they've always been a team that take a lot of defensive risks, which works for them because they bank on attacking fluidity, and that is very much their philosophy. But it's amazing that they have a philosophy that you know very well when Sassuolo plays, that's Sassuolo. That it develops slightly and has changed and is a little bit more pragmatic and vertical under Dionisi. But this is amazing for a club that, as a town, it comes from a small town, but has already earned itself a reputation, is very much viewed as a tough opponent, not in the same way as when you face other sides in Italy who have perhaps had longer histories and have managed to accomplish more over their time period in the league. So it is remarkable what Sassuolo have managed with the budget that they have. And I think most importantly that they've given us so much Italian talents to pick from, whether it's been Locatelli or right now everyone is chasing Scamacca, everyone's chasing Fratesi, everyone is chasing Raspadori. And of course Berardi, everyone would love it if they would give him up. And Ferrari, even though he got a red card against Roma, a lot of eyes on him as well as a defender. They believe in Italian talent, they develop it well, and they make the most of what they have. But I think they are a side that right now has ambition to just keep growing and seeing where that takes them. Sometimes it is simply like, getting a coach like Gasperini who puts you on the map, but they would like to do it, the sort of grassroots level. We start small, we make money, we keep building until we are a mainstay, and then see what happens from there on. And I think it's an excellent way and perhaps something that other teams can learn from.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I'd add, I guess, because again, people don't necessarily have this context in terms of when we talk about a small town. Sassuolo itself is literally a town of like 40,000 people. The stadium, though, is actually in Reggio Emilia, which is just, I suppose, half an hour up the road, which is about 120,000 people. You might draw some of your fan base as well from Modena, which is, again, the same sort of distance away, and that's another 150,000 people maybe. But Modena has its own football team. So we're really talking about something very different to, for instance, Milan or Inter being in such a big city, Roma or even Turin, you know, the big cities of Italian football. This is not that. This is, it's quite close to Bologna, and even Bologna is much, much bigger. So it's very much a small population that's represented in this club, but certainly an overachieving group in that regard. Mina, next question. We've got a big one from Victoria Giordano. It's kind of a double question. Victoria Giordano, who is another Chronicles
Victoria, you're greedy.
tifosa, but it's kind of a double question. So I tell you what I'm going to do is I'll read the question and you can answer part one, I'll answer part two. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Victoria writes, she's a Jersey girl from New Jersey. Hi, Nicky and Mina. First off, I've been listening to you both since your Serie A awesome days. I'm so excited to continue. Thank you, Victoria. So are we. My question is, if the Seven Sisters can only sign one player each summer, one player each this summer, not each summer, who should it be? And also a Serie B question. Who do you think will come up next season and who do you want to come up? They don't have to be the same answer. For anyone who's wondering what Seven Sisters is sort of the seven, I suppose, big clubs. There was a historical group in the 90s, which is actually slightly different. In this case, I would imagine that certainly that we're referring to the top 7 teams in the league right now, frankly, which is Milan, Inter, Napoli, Atalanta, Juventus, Lazio, and Roma.
Are we not Atalanta? So Juventus, Milan, Inter, Roma, so Fiorentina is no longer.
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Fiorentina.
Because that's historic.
Yeah, and that's
because historically Napoli wasn't even on it either.
Of course.
Historically, it was Parma.
Yeah.
So would the new one feature Fiorentina?
Atalanta
not Atalanta?
Atalanta as a team who are in the Champions League every year have to be one of the sisters now, no? To me, they are.
Well, yeah, I would agree with you there. I would say it would probably be the...
Clubby's La Dea, Mina. She's a goddess. Of course she's one of the sisters.
Okay. I mean, I would say, yeah, the current top 5 plus the 2 Roman clubs, you know, Lazio and Roma. So yeah, I agree with that.
If they're going to sign
should we
one
go
player
on
this summer, yeah, who would you be thinking of? I suppose maybe even positions. I suppose at this point it might be quite early for specifics.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have names because obviously it would depend on what's realistic and what's a dream and what kind of answer you're looking for. But I would say probably a role that is important for them. I think that if we are talking about Juventus, it would need to be a midfielder for me. Somebody that has the quality of what they've been missing, somebody who can hold the ball and direct play. If we can somehow bring Pirlo, I think that would be a fantastic but I don't know how many Pirlos exist nowadays. But I would say actually for a lot of the top teams, it would be interesting to have that type of player right now. For Milan, I would like them to have somebody to take over from Ibrahimovic and Giroud. I think they have a wonderful midfield. I think they have 2 excellent centre-backs, even if Kayer is getting on a bit, but him and Tomori. And even really what they've managed to accomplish since I love Calabria and Theo Hernandez have done excellent jobs on the wings. Benacer, Tonali, they are going to lose Kessier, so I think that's an important person to bring in is somebody like Kessier who has the physical presence but also the ability to play a good pass. So a midfield is very important, but so I think is as a striker because I don't think you can depend on Ibrahimovic for very much longer. And I'm not that secure of what Giroud can do on a consistent basis. So I think perhaps that is even more important right now than the midfield. But let's see what does happen in that department there, because they need more than just one purchase. But so do Juve. Inter are very complete. Again, though, I do struggle in the sense that they do have 4 forwards. But sometimes I worry with them that I don't see there being a consistent goal scorer. I think they are still quite dependent on Edin Dzeko, and he is 35 years old. And no matter how much Inzaghi sits there and says, I have 4 that I can choose and rotate from, you do have Lautaro Martinez being young and inconsistent. And so I think that's an issue because that's normal for his age. But you do need, a Lukaku, and Dzeko has been wonderful. But going forward, there needs to be somebody else. I think they've managed to address the Perisic problem with Gosens. I do think they have Brozovic and Çalhanoğlu, and they are going to be signed on. So I don't think there's a problem there. And of course, what then happens, it's about the centre-backs. Ranocchi has done a good job, but De Vrij, Skriniar and Bastoni are amazing, and yet De Vrij is not as amazing this season. He has had a lot of dips. We've obviously seen the huge mistake against Napoli, and I feel like he is in decline and probably going to leave. So that's also something worth addressing for me. I would look to that first and foremost. If I could really then choose, I would try to find somebody that can take over from really just a consistent goal scorer up front, really. And they probably will get that in either Scamacca, or they are looking at quite a few, maybe even Dybala. Then let's go with Atalanta, shall we? You see, Atalanta for me are a very difficult team because they need everything, but then they need nothing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They can make it work with whoever.
Matter.
Yeah, it's like they are the kind of team who look at the change in the sofa and go and buy themselves a meal in a top Michelin star restaurant. So they are literally the side that just doesn't need anything. But I would say somebody to replace Gosens is important, or somebody who can at least give on both levels, on a sporting level and also an addressing level. He's just such a leader, and that must be such a loss. But frankly speaking, you need a player with a little bit more experience who can resolve games from a creative point of view, because I do think that they miss that kind of power that Ilicic has. And oh my God, this is the third week in a row where I forget his name.
Who?
The one who went to Sevilla.
Papu Gomez. Oh my goodness.
His name is always the one I forget. If you notice in every podcast, I mention him and how much I miss him, and I always never remember his name. Thank God he's not my, former husband or anything. But anyway, Papu Gomez, to resolve some games like against Liverpool, you always had that ability to go to Papu Gomez and to go to Ilicic because of the quality that they had, because of that super touch that they could bring, their intelligence, their understanding of space, their understanding of the trajectory of the ball. It's just another level of intelligence that they have alongside Duvan Zapata. And we are looking right now at Atalanta that has Zapata injured, Ilicic not obviously always available because of certain mental health issues, and Duvan Zapata no longer there. And Papu Gomez no longer there. So that is the most important role to fill, is to bring somebody of that intellect, of that intelligence, to give them that special edge in the big games. And then for Roma, midfielder. I think they need a director.
Manager.
I also just...
I'm going to get killed for this, aren't I? Yeah, anyway, sorry, Mina. I should let you go. By the way, I'm in awe at this. You're managing to do all seven. I'm in awe.
No. Would you bring back the old one?
Fonseca?
Yeah.
I think he was doing a better job.
If you had a chance now, would you still do that change?
It's not, it's not my club, but yeah, I think Fonseca was doing a better job. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. So come for me, trolls. Come for me as well. Change the manager. But they've got a lot of attackers, so I definitely think that they could do with more quality midfielders and not be Xhaka. And Lazio, what do you think with Lazio? Somebody who can actually replace Immobile when he's injured and doesn't have to play every single match? Maybe that's where I'd go.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because of course, yes, yeah. Well, I mean, every team, I think they probably have never quite got on the same level replacement for De Vrij, have they? But I think it's interesting actually, because yes, my instinct is a replacement Immobile there, but how will Zaccagni pan out now that he's becoming more of a sort of forward player? Although he's still going to be playing wide, I think another centre forward for sure would not go amiss. Of course, they said goodbye to Correa in the summer as well. Yeah, did you have any more, Mina? I feel like you've just had a.
No, for Napoli, I would just say somebody along the lines of who can replace Lorenzo Insigne, because I think they're pretty stacked everywhere else, really. So just another creative role, because obviously Dries Mertens is not going to be there either. So another creative figure that can play out on the wing, because He has been very trustworthy and a reliable figure for them.
So Zaccagni, and then you got it from my last year. Who knows? Maybe Berardi's still due for his move. Right. I'll try and do a quick answer on Serie B because Victoria, we love you, but we feel like we've given you a lot of this episode, and then we've got one more question we want to get to as well. I think who's going to come up is still too early to know. The top of the Serie B table is quite close at the moment. There's, I think, 2 points between the top four, and then Monza just behind them as well. Lecce have been leading for a little bit. They had a big collapse at the end of last season that cost them, but they're certainly well positioned. And Brescia are really interesting at the moment under Pippo Inzaghi. Massimo Cellino, the Brescia president, tried to fire Inzaghi, only for Inzaghi to sort of show up in his office and say, there's a clause in my contract where it says, like, I mean, not you can't, but there's like a big financial payoff you have to give me if you fire me while we're in the top 8 of the league, which, by the way, tells you about what the expectations were when he was signed. Like, top 8 was viewed as good. Right now, they're 4th. And Cellino, having already lined up his next manager to the point of, getting the first assistant was already down at the training ground checking things out, suddenly had to backtrack and go, actually, I don't fancy giving you that golden handshake, so you're still the manager. So if Brescia can survive the madness that is Cellino as their owner, maybe Pippo Inzaghi can bring them back up. Monza are also super interesting because, of course, Silvio Berlusconi is in charge there. And, you asked the question of which we'd want to come up. I am not keen to make this a political podcast, but I just want to say politically, no interest in seeing Berlusconi anywhere near Italian politics again anytime. But as a journalist who likes writing colourful stories, would that be a fun story to cover him being back in football at the top level? Of course it would. So a little bit of me selfishly thinks that would be a fun story to cover journalistically. The other one, which selfishly I might want back, who are also in the mix, Pisa, but that has to do with more the fact that we're talking about a part of the country that I'm very fond of, near to Sassuolo and Bologna, by the way. That's the part of the country that I've spent a lot of my summers in because my dad is from a small town in Emilia-Romagna, so I will never be sad to have more teams in that part of Italy in the Italian top flight. So lots of fun options actually in Serie B, and we will keep an eye on that as we get towards the business end of the season and keep you updated.
Wow, well done to answering that question. Check you out. Which one do you want to go up? So you think Pisa, yeah?
I love the idea of Pisa and Serie A. Journalistically, I think Monza would be fun to cover. I think that would be a fun story to write about and talk about.
Okay, I think we have time for a quick third one, which I think, we've addressed on the whole, but it is from Patrick, and he says a thank you from this Milan fan located in Salt Lake, Utah. Well, hello again. How far off is Milan? I love the way that you sort of laugh when I say stuff like this. How far off is Milan from Inter? Is it just 1 or 2 players, or is there more to it? I am going to say that this question came in obviously before Milan had reached the summit of Serie A, and it was a question that we kept thinking, we got to answer this. But I think overall, when we're talking about right now Inter look like the formidable side, and Milan is sort of, trying to challenge. How far off are they? What do you think? Is it a case of a couple of players, or do you think there's a more of a financial issue there?
Yeah, it's a really sort of tricky thing to pin down in one sense, I think, because when the two teams were on the pitch together in the derby most recently, Milan won. But as I was saying on the main podcast this week, I thought that Inter looked like the better team noticeably. I thought in terms of the quality of play, the cohesion, I thought Inter just played better football. And it was kind of this weird quirk that Milan were then bailed out in a sense by a player who hasn't been that integral for them for most of the season. Giroud, who has lots of quality. He's someone who's, I think, probably been underappreciated in his career overall, but who has not been central to who Milan are this season, who saves them. I think Milan going to, or at least can continue to get better without signing anyone, actually, if we talk about 1 or 2 players, because they've got so many young players who are moving in the right direction. You've got Leao, who I've raved about on the main podcast. You've got Sandro Tonali. You've got Mike Maignan. There's 1 or 2 who may not be there next season. I think Frank Kessié, there's a lot of us expect him to move on this summer. There was talk of that happening as soon as January. But there's growth that's going to continue to happen naturally. I think probably at some point, if Milan want to make the step to being back at ready to compete every season for the Scudetto, ready to fight in the Champions League, stand toe to toe with the big teams, probably they do need not a lot, but they need one or two of those signings that, and I don't mean you have to go out and sign someone for 75 million euros like Juventus did either, by the way, but you need to make a couple of smart, high quality signings to add that little bit of metal to the young group. And you've already done that, I guess, you're trying to do that by bringing in Ibrahimovic and Giroud, these experienced players. But I think maybe you need the equivalent of that, but like 27, 28 instead of 40 is kind of what I think this team needs to make that last step. But I think they're going to continue getting better even as they are. And look, despite when they were on the same pitch as Inter, looking to me like a worse team than Inter, they're ahead of Inter right now, and I think it's entirely possible they win the league this season. So there's not much in it at all.
No, there really isn't much in it, but it is, for me, it's not a case of one or two players. I think it's exactly like what Nicky says. It's more of like a sort of a financial thing, in the sense that it's important when we talk about Achraf Hakimi, Romelu Lukaku and Antonio Conte. They are two guarantees that help you win a title, because it is, to win a title, there are just so many aspects. But what Pioli has done is close the gap between the likes of Inter and Juventus, who can spend that kind of money, to Milan, because he's created that wonderful team ethic and produced excellent tactical schemes in which really Milan can score from any which way you want them to. They are a very fluid side, and that obviously, like just like we saw against the manage against Sampdoria, it was a long throw, perfect distribution from a goalkeeper, rather, to have Leao run onto it and score a goal. So he has managed to close the gap, but you do find that the team is working much harder than any other teams in order to always guarantee their place, and sometimes that is difficult to do for a number of years, and that's why money needs to be invested. But for me, I don't know if I can say, it is obviously smart investments, but I do think I feel like it does need to be sort of a £60 million player. And I think it's somebody who has won or is accustomed to winning that can make the difference. Because Brahim Diaz is wonderful, Leao is wonderful, Castillejos, Salmakers, whoever you want to mention. But consistency is key. And obviously, there's not always going to be somebody who will produce that unless it's somebody who's produced that over a while. So it is having sort of a veteran and somebody who makes the difference, but who is still young enough to be able to provide the consistency and the availability required that Ibrahimovic and Giroud cannot do at the moment. So it is, for me, it's a question of money. Right now, they're just working their socks off to try to close the gap. And I do think that they have a chance of winning this title. It's not beyond them just yet. But if they are a team that want to compete in all competitions, they need to have squad depth. They need to be able to take off a player and introduce another one in the way that Juventus can and Inter can. And so that is the special salt, because Napoli do have a perfect system. They have had excellent players all along, many of which play for their national teams. But the truth of the matter is that, you do sort of need to keep your Cavanis at times when you are chasing the big titles. And that when you are facing the likes of Liverpool, that you do have to provide more consistency to those results and show and transfer that dominance that you can manage over certain teams like Sampdoria over to obviously other sides. So I guess money, but that will come. And right now, the way that the team is built and has progressed, I think it's sensational work from everyone involved. So I love the way that they are building themselves. So maybe just a little bit of patience, and we'll see what happens.
I couldn't agree more, Mina. That's all we've got time for, guys, on this week's Q&A episode. We do hope you enjoyed it with us. Please do check out our website at SerieAchronicles.com and click that Chronicles Tifosi button if you would like to join our Patreon community, where you can get access to exclusive episodes and bonus content, or you can contribute a smaller amount as a supporter, just to help us carry on doing what we're doing and making this podcast, because we really love doing it, but it does need a little bit of funding as well to make a podcast like this happen. Please do keep getting your questions into us on Twitter at SerieAchronPod with the hashtag Chronicles Q&A, or go to our website to send us an email or a voice message like we heard in this week's episode. I really enjoyed that. So please do send us voice messages if you would like to, and we can put the audio straight on into the show. Find both of us on Twitter at Mina Rizuki, at Nicky Bandini. Subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles YouTube channel for clips of the show if you would like to see me drinking tea and Mina reapplying her lipstick, as we were saying earlier. And leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, as long as it's going to be a good one. That's all for now. We will see you. Well, we'll be back for a main podcast next week and some content coming through the week on the Patreon for sure, because I am looking forward to these Champions League games. We will see you next week.